Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all to the General Government Committee meeting this evening. And I'm calling this meeting to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Dennehy?
Here.
Councilmember Gonzalez? Absent. Councilmember Jaquez? Absent. Councilmember Meisner?
Here.
Councilmember Reed? Absent. Councilmember B. Smith?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Here.
Mayor Smith?
Here.
Thank you. We're here tonight to talk about an energy advisory committee, and that is in relation to the ballot measure that was on the November ballot, which was requesting authorization for the city to enter into a franchise agreement with Black Hills Corporation. Ryan, are you going to start us off?
Yes, I will, and we have a presentation to get started with just to kind of guide the discussion tonight. All right, so as Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick mentioned, the city electric franchise failed on November 3rd. The purpose of utility franchises is to govern the utility provider's use of the right-of-way. For example, how they repair street cuts and move utility lines when they're in the way of other services or development that's occurring. Utility franchise does not determine who the utility provider is. The utility territories are determined by the Public Utilities Commission, which is a state organization. Losing the electric franchise represented about a $500,000 loss to the city's budget, and that meant a reduction in programs for sidewalk improvement programs, alleyways, things that you see typically in the right-of-way. So that's where most of that money for the franchise went. The city and Black Hills are working to wind down the previous franchise. On January 13th, the city informed Black Hills to stop collecting the franchise fee, and Black Hills has responded and will stop collecting that fee beginning in February. City teams and Black Hills are currently working out other several issues that are related to the franchise. Some examples of those are, street lights and how those are taken care of, share agreements for utility poles, and some other things. So I know Black Hills is working internally on their side, and then we're expecting to have a meeting between Black Hills and the city here in a couple of weeks. Now, for tonight's meeting, wanted to have a discussion on the makeup of this energy committee. The Mayor Pro Tem, and I have had some discussions, and this is kind of the proposed composition of that committee, but certainly we'll turn it over back to you, Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick, and open that up for discussion with how you'd like to move forward with this discussion.
Thanks, Ryan. I'd just like to point out also that there's kind of two separate things here. There's franchise agreements, which generally cover the things that you mentioned, as well as establishing a franchise fee. The state of Colorado has determined that cities, that their public right-of-ways are a item that can be, where a fee can be charged for use of those right-of-ways, and that franchise fees, although perhaps part of a franchise agreement, are just a part and not the same thing. So a franchise fee are different things. And I just wanted to say that, kind of to start this off, that we are really kind of in uncharted territories here. Our legal counsel has advised us that this is a pretty unique situation There's not really court cases or settled law on the issue of what happens if a vote of the citizens rejects a proposed franchise. And so there was a lot of thought that had to go into what exactly the next steps should be. But that brings us to tonight. And we do have several members of the public, including someone on Zoom, who'd like to address us. Does any council member wish to say anything as in a preliminary fashion here? Or the mayor?
Let's hear from our citizens, and then we can go from there.
Thank you, sure. Okay, and what we'll do is we're calling people up in the order that the request to speak made it to our city clerk. And so first up would be John Vigil from Black Hills.
Good evening, members of council, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you this evening. I just wanted to be here personally to affirm that we had received the letter from the city that we had every intent on stopping the collection of the franchise fee as you requested. As Ryan's presentation indicated, that will happen beginning February, in the first part of February, and that will be followed by a brief reconciliation of the franchise fee account, and then the city will receive their final payment shortly thereafter. I do want to clarify, just from our standpoint, I know this could raise questions. I think that might be what you were alluding to, Councilman Hamrick. We will continue to provide the city with the energy that they, are used to having, and we have every intention of continuing to do that. So very little should happen. Very little should change for your constituents, and they continue to use the resources that we have available, both our website, the 800 number if they have need for service or otherwise. In regard to the franchise itself, we recognize, as did you, the budget impact, and really that fee is to help us to compensate you for the right-of-way. And so we are ready to re-engage the city when you're ready to work on some path forward, and we would prefer to do that because we recognize that we have impact in your community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for John? Any questions for John? Thank you, John.
Thanks.
John. And now we have Julie Holmes, who's on Zoom.
Hello.
And we can hear you.
Hello, that was my dog saying hello as well. So I'm new to Canyon City, and I'm interested to find out what you are doing as the city council, and so that's why I'm listening to this issue with Black Hills Energy. And I will learn from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, and welcome to Canyon City.
Thank you.
Next will be Emily Tracy.
Good evening. Do I need the mask off, or does it matter? Okay,
You get a little bit better sound quality with the mask
that's
off.
true. So I'll do that. I don't have prepared remarks. I'm happy to be here tonight and looking forward to going on forward with a dialogue with the city. As you know, Canyon City's Energy Future was created 3 years ago. My, how time flies, right? And in that time, we've done a lot of different things as a group, including what we're continuing to do, which is reach out to various providers of electricity, to communities that have done different things over the years, whether they've municipalized or done some other kinds of things. We've also talked in the past 3 years with several different providers And we know that there's at least one that's interested in doing business with the city. I don't know if you've gotten that word yet or not, but there's interest out there to at least provide part of the services, if not all of the services. So we're just here to either answer questions or continue to have that dialogue with what will be an interesting effort, I think, on the part of the city creating this energy committee. So we look forward to participating in that and to helping move forward on this issue.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Jim, did you have something?
Thanks, Emily. As we move forward with this process, which I'm not sure what the process is, but has your group had any discussion about how that group is going to finance their expenses?
Say more what you mean about that group and their expenses.
Well, as we move forward, there's going to be a committee that will hopefully be able to explore the options that are available and then advise council in terms of what those options are and what makes sense. It's my assumption that in the process of doing it, that committee is going to incur a number of expenses in terms of doing the research, and probably most of that expense is going to come in the form of legal. But how are you guys anticipating offsetting those potential costs that are there?
Well, if I understand you correctly, you're talking about the energy committee that's being proposed that has membership of city, Canyon
Right. City's
energy futures, residents, businesses in the community. I don't know if that committee will incur expenses or not. All I know is what I've seen in the presentation tonight in regard to staff support from the city. So I guess that's something among many other things that we'd want to have a dialogue about. I don't see the committee that's being proposed as being separate from the city, and maybe I'm misunderstanding what's being proposed.
Well, it's actually a citizens committee established by council, but it is a citizens committee.
Okay. Well, we should talk more about that. It looks to me as if it's a city-established committee with staff support, and maybe we need to get into the details of what that means. This is, we've had a citizens committee for 3 years, but we see this as really something for the city to take leadership on and move forward on and look at those alternatives. I see this as a step up from where we've been. We've had a citizens committee without funding other than incidental expenses that we've funded for ourselves. But I see this as a city-established committee. If I'm wrong, then you can help us understand what you see it as.
Well, some of the things that I'll express are me as an individual council person, but I feel like the city did their due diligence in terms of trying to find an alternative. There's a lot of things on the table that the city was advised legally in terms of what options we had and what options we didn't have. And I'm still personally under the understanding that telling Black Hills to leave town is not a viable option without some tremendous legal expense associated with it. And I don't think, the general flavor of council is that they were not interested in getting into $1 million battle to kick Black Hills out of the community. So relative to that, while this may be a city-sponsored committee, I don't know. I mean, as an individual council person, I'm not interested in spending more city dollars to try to figure out how to kick Black Hills out of town. Because the big problem isn't finding an alternative provider. The big problem is getting rid of the current provider that we have. So relative to that, I see a tremendous amount of expenses associated with terminating the right for Black Hills to provide power in this community. So how would you propose to fund the expenses of doing that? Because I don't think there's anybody in this room that has the legal background to be able to accomplish that.
There's several things I'd like to say, and first I want to say that I appreciate the opportunity to have this dialogue. I think it's the first time, other than meeting in a different setting over the last 3 years with John and formerly with Caitlin Turner, I think it's the first time we've really had an opportunity to have this very needed dialogue. So first I want to say that. Our committee is not looking to kick Black Hills out of town. There are various ways that we can, our goal all along for 3 years has been to make electricity more affordable in this community. That's really been the big issue and almost the only issue. The fact that I pay 77% more here per kilowatt hour than I pay to Xcel in Breckenridge. And the fact that Canyon City High School pays 81% more per kilowatt hour than Summit High School pays to Xcel. So it's that cost issue. So it's not necessarily kicking Black Hills or any existing provider out of town. It's looking for ways, perhaps, if the whole community choice energy effort goes forward on the state level, it may be a way in the future to structure it where Black Hills provides part of the services, maybe the maintenance and operations, and maybe the community has the opportunity in the future to actually have a different wholesale provider of electricity that would be more affordable and thus reduce those costs. We don't know yet what those answers are, and we're not looking to, we understand enough about state law that we know we're not about just kicking Black Hills out. They have to continue to serve this community, and that's the way it should be. But we do think it's important that the city plays a leadership role, and I think that you will through this committee that you're creating, in looking at what the alternatives might be and what's out there, and how do we, over time, get to more affordable electricity. That's been the goal all along. And so that's what I'm here to talk about. But I guess I'll say again, I really would like to see the city play a lead role on this. If I'm understanding you correctly, and it's kind of like you're sitting back and wanting a citizens committee to play a lead role, well, that's a little different. We'd like to work with the city on exploring what those options are and finding more affordable power. It is a key economic development issue in Pueblo and Canyon City, this cost of electricity here. And it may well be that Black Hills is the answer. Maybe there's something that Black Hills can do differently over time and make that more affordable for our communities. But we have communities here that are roughly 30% below the statewide median household income. That's what it roughly is in Canyon City and Pueblo. We have a high poverty rate here and in Pueblo. And the cost of electricity is just, it's a tough burden for businesses and it's tough for individuals. So that's what we're all about, is just looking at what those alternatives might be. And I hope that this new committee that we will be a part of and the city will be a part of and community business owners will be a part of and a county commissioner, I hope that that new committee can just help move forward and find what those alternatives might be. It's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. We know that under the structure of laws we have in Colorado, it's not a simple process. But we also know there's some alternatives out there. And it might be that the alternative's right here in this room. Maybe it's Black Hills looking at things differently. We don't know.
I'll close quickly. I just find it interesting that you take this approach today. And with all due respect, I obviously been grossly misinformed and been reading the wrong information in terms of what your committee's objectives were over the last 3 years. Thank you.
And I'm going to call on Councilman Dennehy, and then I'll call on you, Madam Mayor.
And the one thing I want to say is, this was pushed through with the voters.
I'm sorry.
With the voters, it got on the ballot to eliminate the franchise agreement and, basically stop Black Hills. Or not stop them, but enough to get rid of the franchise agreement and continue looking. But, and then now we want to take the cities and say, hey, we want the city to do this, but yet that just cost the city $500,000 or $500,000 a year. We just lost that. We just lost that because we lost the franchise agreement. We just lost that for streets and sidewalks in our community and our alleyways. And where's that? I mean, we want to make another committee and bring the government into it, but we just lost, $500,000 that was fixing our streets and, and slowly fixing some of the alleyways and fixing sidewalks. So now, I don't mean this, and I'm not saying this in a bad way. Please don't think that. But where do we come up with that money now?
Well, I would respond in several ways to that. Number one, there hasn't been a franchise in place for more than 3 years, and Black Hills continued to collect that fee and remit it to the city. As I understand it, unless there's something that hasn't been made public about that, as I understand it, the city decided after the result of the vote to say to Black Hills, don't collect that fee anymore. I didn't hear Black Hills say, and maybe they just haven't said it publicly, that they were going to stop as a result of that. I would say, too, as you all know, as well as anybody, that the city also charges a sales tax on that and collects a good amount of revenue on the sales tax. So the customer's paying, or had been paying, the 3% franchise fee plus a 3% sales tax. And so I think whatever direction that goes, I think that's okay. It's a tough time for individuals, and I would dare say it may be a tougher time for individuals and for businesses than it is for city government. And so, I would just leave it at that. And I wanted to say one other thing too, and I know that there has been some communication this week with the city attorney, but I don't know if that communication has been passed on to staff and to council members and the mayor.
Well, I will do some clarification. When Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick said that we're kind of in a gray area right now, that before, when the franchise agreement had expired, just based on the nature of the wording of the franchise agreement and backed up by court rulings, that franchise could just still operate, even though it was expired, operate as usual, is the same as always. The gray area came in we're in uncharted land where the voters voted specifically against a franchise agreement, and they've said no. And that's where we get into, well, do we operate as normal still? Is it still ethical and of highest integrity to charge that 3% franchise fee? And we did not feel comfortable going into those uncharted waters. And so we have lost $500,000 revenue to our city budget. And we had to scramble to accommodate accordingly to take care of the basic needs of our citizens. I'll have more to say later on. I want to hear from some other customers, but I am curious because you said that the intent of the committee, and this has absolutely nothing to do, by the way, with what our committee, we want it set up as a success. We want it to be able to research and have these conversations. Staffing, council members will be participating in it. And we want to make sure that it's well balanced and that the number one job is to find out, why did people really vote no? What did they mean by that no vote? And we've had a lot of mixed feedback already, and which is part of our intention of really finding out what that no vote meant for our citizens so we can move accordingly to what their true desire is. But I'm curious, when you said your intention was never to get rid of Black Hills, when all of your advertising said, vote no on Black Hills.
Right, it was vote
And
no.
that's a side note.
It was vote no on the franchise.
Well, a little tiny letter of franchise.
But we have to all acknowledge that under state law in Colorado, you don't just vote away a utility, and we've been aware of that all along. And again, the key thing that we've focused on for 3 years is the cost here, the cost that all the citizens and businesses bear here as compared to what many other utilities provide. That's been our key focus. And the reason I ask you about the city attorney, I know that there's been some communication, because I got word of it today, that there is a provider out there that is interested in approaching the city, but I didn't know if that had been communicated yet from the city attorney
Do you
to
want to
staff
name
and
that
council.
provider?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm aware that the city attorney has received some type of communication, but I don't have the details on that, and I believe they have some meetings scheduled later this week to discuss that particular communication.
Thank you.
Thank you,
So,
Ryan.
and again, just to clarify, our whole goal as a committee was to look at alternatives, and those alternatives can take a variety of different forms. You can have one company doing part of it, you can have another company doing wholesale. City of Fountain, we are in the process right now of gathering information from the City of Fountain to seeing what they're doing, for example, with Guzman Energy, just as one example. But I think it's important to point out that our goal has not been to get rid of anybody. Our goal has been to reduce costs here for individual customers and for businesses. That's still our goal. And I guess a sub-goal that I would just speak to is that we want the city to take a leadership role on this. This is where we are now, and it's key to recognize that almost 2/3 of the voters of the city said no to the franchise renewal. So yeah, it's critically important to find out, what does that mean? What does that reflect? Is it all about cost? We suspect that it's mostly about cost. It's not about people. We like the people who work for Black Hills, just like everyone in the community here likes the people. It's about the cost. So I think that is a very good first goal, is to find out what did that vote mean. And, that'll be a great thing to start to work on.
I'm going to recognize myself here for a minute. And
You
then
do
I'll-
that, John.
Then I'll call you on you, Jim. But as far as the committee, I think it's been my feeling and my belief that council is looking at a committee similar to the marijuana committee, similar to the 2A Streets Committee, that can independently look at the issues involved and make a recommendation to the city, a formal recommendation about what needs to happen. And then perhaps the committee members would take a leadership role in proposing that to the citizens. So that's I think the kind of the paradigm we're looking at. And one other point I'd like to make is that before we can talk about the provision of services, the most important question, and the first question that needs to be answered, is if there's to be a change, who will own the wires and poles and transformers? And so that'll probably be a charge to the committee. And I'd like to recognize Jim.
I'll pass.
Thank you. Dolly.
Hi, Emily.
Hi.
I've been listening, so I just got hung up at work, but I've been listening online. And I heard you say just a few minutes ago that it was never the intent to get rid of Black Hills, and that you were fully aware that Black Hills, that it's very difficult to get Black Hills or get a utility out of a city. I remember maybe a couple months back we were having a discussion, and I don't remember who it was on Zoom, but it was somebody on your committee that was not aware that Black Hills wouldn't be written in, that it would be, somebody asked, what next? If we vote down Black Hills, who will we have? So, and I remember that conversation quite clearly because it was somebody on Zoom. And I was shocked that somebody on your committee with such thorough information that you guys have shared was not aware that it was just the franchise agreement. So I just want to clarify that it has not always been about it hasn't been about always lowering, it's been about getting rid of Black Hills. So
Thank you, Dolly.
I just want to say that.
Thank you, Dolly. And I think unless you have something really burning to say.
I have just a question, and I may have missed this in the slide presentation. Is there a time frame given to the committee? Is there a particular written mission statement for the committee, or?
Brandon, if you can put the presentation back up. So we have the proposed composition, and if council's fine with that, we can move forward with that as well. I believe the mayor's already talked about this a little bit, but the committee goals, phase one will be a neutral assessment of the election. Why did voters vote no? How do we replace the franchise? And then phase two would be working on action steps based off of the phase one analysis. And then as far as next steps, there would be a resolution that comes before City Council on March 1st that actually forms the committee. We would put in that composition into the resolution. We'd solicit those letters of intent for people who want to serve on the committee. That'd probably be out for a couple weeks, and then that would go before City Council for the appointments, and then we'd start scheduling those committee meetings. Probably, looking at probably beginning of April, mid-April for those meetings to start. And, as far as timeline goes, I think it's going to depend on, the committee and what they find and, what direction they decide to go.
Okay. So you're not, at this point, giving a deadline, so to speak, to the committee?
That would be up to council and the direction they give.
Thank you, Emily. We appreciate your input.
Yeah, I'll just say one last very quick thing. I do think a key thing that, and has come up multiple times already, that we just don't want to forget the vote. Our committee does not take credit for the outcome of this election, frankly. Our committee had a budget of something like, if you include in-kind, something like $5,000, a little over $5,000, which was a fraction of what Black Hills had in their budget, as you know from their filings. So I think that it is a key and a critical thing, and you have it right there in your proposal, to find out what the thoughts are of the citizens and really, dig into that. That is something that our group had hoped would take place, maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, to really have that dialogue. It didn't happen, and so here we are now, and I think we'll learn a lot by talking with the community. We, as a small committee, we do not take credit for the outcome of that election. I think it's a true reflection of how people view the size of the bills that they're paying. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'd like to call on Jerry Fry. Is Jerry?
She's online.
Is she online? There we go. And hopefully you've got us off of mute, Jerry.
Thank you to council.
Thank you. We can hear you.
Again, thank you. I will need to concede my time to further discussion of others in our group as necessary.
No, we don't concede time.
This is just kind of an open discussion tonight. It's not too structured. It's not like a regular city council meeting. And so we do a little bit better at free form with these types of meetings. Go ahead, please.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Didn't mean to talk over you. I do appreciate the opportunity. I wasn't able to come in person, and so I do appreciate this ability. I do also look to the City Council for leadership on this process as we go forward. I think that it's very important that we do understand what it is that the community needs. And sometimes they can't even articulate that. All they know is that their bills are too high. So anything that we can do to begin to address that is going to help our economy and help us moving forward to solve this issue. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say tonight. I hope to be able to participate in discussions as we go forward. Having been a former business owner in Canyon City, I know the impact of the really high power bills. I also know wonderful help that I got from the Black Hills employees who service this area. But it is not they that I have an issue with. It is the corporate culture that has left us as victims in our own rural community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Can I just, that was nicely worded, Jerry. Thank you so much. This is Dolly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolly.
Next, we'd like to ask Carol Dunn if she'd like to speak.
Hi, it's good to be here, and I am happy that you're going to form this committee. I think, as always, my issue is businesses are paying too much for their power compared to other places in the state, and it's really hurting our economy. Even with the COVID problems, Main Street is pitiful. It makes me very sad. And I know a lot of people are struggling to make ends meet. And a big part of it, I believe, is their utility bills. And I just want to say that I see any committee as being a liaison, being kind of a matchmaker between what's out there in the world and what we need in Canyon City and what the council can do. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that as far as a reach out to see if an entity is interested, I think that it may be partially a one-way street. Council is the ones who have to do that reach out. Citizens can't do it. Say, hey, would you come in and help us? It's the leadership in the city that has to make that move. So I just look forward to working with you as always and for the betterment of our community. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Oh, don't let the mayor speak.
Get up here.
Preston, why don't you come up and
Can we object?
It'll be like the old days.
No pounding on the podium either.
I've lived through my one-year moratorium, so that's what I promised my family. But just from a private resident, I just wonder a few things about your committee. Who paid for all that advertising and everything? You come up here and you tell us it wasn't about the rate, but that's all you did is talk about the rate. When that wasn't the truth, no, don't answer. I meant just telling you. That's all your advertising was about the rate increase. Have you gone to the PUC to complain about the rate? Have any of you in 3 years gone to a PUC meeting? It's advertised. Why didn't you go? Well, you didn't. And you talk about a difference in what you pay, Emily, in the town that you live in, which is Breckenridge. You live in Breckenridge. Okay. That's fine. What makes the difference between you pay 88 cents more or 7? Have you researched what that difference is? What is it? Okay. Well, we'll have that conversation. But this has hurt our town. I've been doing this here 47 years. This is an important part of my life. And the whole thing was pitched for They're going to save the rate. They're going to make this. Well, that could come later. That could be a discussion. It's about rent for the public right-of-way that the people of Canyon City own. That's what you're getting paid for, period. Okay? Any questions?
Thank you,
Preston.
former mayor.
So, Jim.
Go ahead. Are you
No.
wrapping up or no?
I was going to wrap up, but go
Okay,
ahead.
well,
Okay.
I personally, and as a council person, will make every attempt to transition to working with the group. But I'm gonna be honest with you. It has been my personal opinion, I'll repeat, that your intention of your campaign was to get rid of the franchise agreement by conveying to the people that if we got rid of the franchise agreement, we get rid of Black Hills and we fix your rate problem. And that whole process that I believe was sold to those voters that voted no misled them. Because as you see now, we have no franchise agreement and Black Hills is still here because the fundamental issue that gives them the right to be in this community has not been addressed. And I agree wholeheartedly that we need to find a way of reducing our electricity rates in this community. And they're high. Are they too high? I don't know. I mean, how do we stand comparatively? Some are higher, some are lower. But I'll make every effort I can to support the committee and to move in a positive direction. But I'm opposed to just starting with, well, we've got another provider that wants to step in. Because in my opinion, that's irrelevant. We've already got a provider that you need to get that provider out before you can talk about getting another provider in. And I don't know how you're going to go about getting rates reduced with a public entity that's getting approved through the PUC. Council fundamentally has nothing to do with the authorization of the rates. We know that. I think you people know that, but that's not what the campaign seemed to communicate. And again, I'll do my best to try to get over that misinformation, and we'll go from here.
Thank you, Jim. Madam Mayor?
I would just like, in my final comments, that we are listening to the vote. We saw the no vote. And that's why we're here today, and that's why on March 1st we're going to form this committee. It's an energy advisory committee, and it's to give advice. It's to do that deeper digging together and really find out we felt like we had those answers. We don't know if that was conveyed to the public appropriately, but maybe through this committee it can be. Again, we will find out why the vote was no and make sure that we lead the committee accordingly. But as was mentioned, we live in a poverty-level community. The electricity fees, if they are too expensive for many, well, now they have 3% less to pay, which is a help, except for it doesn't help the city being able to provide the basic services for them. But another charge to that committee, if we get to this level, will be how will we pay for the feasibility studies? How will we pay for the legal fees? How will we pay to purchase the poles and the electricity if that's something that somebody wants to if this committee feels like that should be pursued? We're talking about, instead of $500,000 a year, we're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars that our citizens probably cannot afford to absorb. And I want to charge that committee to include that into the consideration of their studies. And we are going to do it together. We are going to do it open-minded. And we are going to do what's best for our citizens in the end. And, you know, and I have to give you credit, Emily, is that we've had these committees before, and perhaps we should have had this committee before the election. Maybe that would have helped. Lessons learned. But we will move forward, and we're gonna be okay.
Thank you, Ashley. Brandon?
I was actually, Mayor Smith kind of touched on what I was going to touch on, so.
I'll
thank
do
you.
it again.
I was just going to talk about maybe the committee should have been formed before the election, so thank you for that.
I do have one other item. I loved in the new captioning that we have, I don't know if you noticed, Dolly, but it translated you to darling, and so that was to darling. Yeah.
Did it right there.
Ryan, do you have any other wrap-up comments?
Now, as long as council is good with the composition, we will move forward with drafting the resolution and putting that on the agenda.
Can you go back to that composition?
Sure. Brandon, can you pull up that slide deck again, please?
I guess my one question would be, with permission.
Sure.
Would be to the committee. I mean, it looks like from there that the Energy Future Committee would have 2 representatives. I mean, what's your feeling about that structure in terms of, does it make sense?
I'm sorry, are
Somebody.
you directing that to me, or?
Somebody out there that's on the committee, I'm asking them whether that structure makes sense from their perspective of what they think this committee could accomplish or should accomplish.
This is Emily. I think it looks fine. I don't have any preconceived notions about that. I would just add, I think, I'll just put this as a very minor comment. I think it's unfortunate that I sense that there's some anger on the part of some council members toward our committee, toward our citizens, toward, I'm not sure. If we'd had this kind of dialogue 2 or 3 years ago, maybe we wouldn't be in this position today.
Well, we did have a lot of dialogue.
We did have it.
It wasn't the dialogue you liked to hear, but we had a lot of dialogue.
This is the first meeting I've been to where I haven't been cut off at 3 minutes for an entire
What's that
meeting.
got
That's
to
what
do
I'm
with it?
talking about, is having that ability to talk back and forth. I do not mind personally at all if any of you are angry at me or angry at our group. I don't mind that. Let's take that and make it constructive and see where we can go with it. I think it's unfortunate that we're having this conversation now instead of quite some time ago. So I just want to say, we're here, our committee is here, and other citizens who aren't even part of our core committee are here to work with you and see where it goes and see what we can do. The goal is to make electricity more affordable in this community. That's always been the goal.
Mandy?
I just had a question, and I do apologize for being late. For the way the composition of this committee is going to be, is there a selection process that you guys discussed earlier that I missed? Okay, I'll get the notes. I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, so what happens for new council members, what happens is after March 1st, we'll solicit letters. And so it'll be a certain period and it'll be advertised. Please send your letters to council. We will get all of those letters and then we'll decide from those letters who will make up that committee.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and
Categorically.
Yeah, so we'll choose 2 business owners, we'll choose 2 residents, et cetera.
And those letters will go to the city clerk, and she'll present them to council.
Thank you, Dolly.
So one question, going back to the slide that has the, yep, right there. Thank you, Brandon. Canyon City Business Owners 2. Canyon City Citizens Residents 2. Canyon City Energy Future 2. How can we ensure that those aren't overlapping?
Well, that's what you do in the selection process.
We will decide.
And some of them may, I mean, yeah, you're going to have some residents that are also a business owner.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm more
or
concerned
business
about-
owners that aren't residents, but they pay they're affected by.
We'll review, Dolly, I'd say we'll review the applications in council and then make a decision from there.
Okay,
And I
right.
think the important part is the representation. You want to make sure that somebody from the business community is represented. You want to make sure each of those categories have some type of representation so those voices are heard.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Jim?
I I just get a little concerned that, what do you got, 2, 4, 6, 8,
Committee
9?
of 9.
I don't know that business community is representation is appropriate. And I don't know that you split that. I think we've got business owners in the community that are very heavily impacted by electrical rates. And then we have a significant number of businesses that are not nearly as heavily impacted. I mean, anybody that's got freezers, coolers, and what have you, those people are significantly impacted by the rates and by the reliability, which is where I started at 5 years ago. But I don't know that in that business section that we don't, I don't know that we don't.
So, Councilman Meisner, if I make one comment, we do have some business owners that aren't citizens of Canyon City as well. So having that separate category kind of gets, opportunity for some of those business owners who don't live in the city to participate in this committee. And that, that may be a discussion for council as well, if that,
And I think one of the biggest arguments of the energy future, as they would tell us month after month, repeated messages, is expensive for our businesses.
Thank you. Dolly?
So my question was going to be, does the business owner need to be? My question was, did the business owner need to be a Canyon City resident? So you answered that.
And,
Well, that's up to us to decide if you want that or not. Yeah.
Was that your actual question?
It was my actual
Okay,
question.
so
Yes.
that makes sense now, what
Yeah.
you said.
And although we're not necessarily, but it's a council, it's a joint decision. But if I understand what we've been saying tonight, it's not necessarily restricted to residents of Canyon City for this committee. But I would like, the comment that I would like to make is that whatever the city decides in terms of what we do about the franchise, what we can do moving forward, that unless it's a completely new paradigm where Black Hills sells assets to us and we look at a new provider or service providers, what we do inside the city will not impact county residents.
So, are you open to changing those numbers? I mean, I would recommend 3 business owners and 1 resident. And that comes from a standpoint that I think that I don't like my power bill, and I think there's a lot of people out there, but I think those residents can be properly represented by that group of people that's up there. But
Well, it's the residents that voted no.
well, that's true, but
I would just remind you that we do need to look at the applications as we get them. We may change our minds on numbers based on the number of applications that we have or the people that, the knowledge and skills and ability that the individual applicants may bring to the committee. So we can, that's certainly.
if you're going to do that, you're going to have to change your ordinance.
the resolution.
Or resolution.
Yeah.
You just can't have a resolution establishing 9 members at a group A, B, and C, and then when it comes time to select, say, oh, that doesn't make sense, let's do A, B, and C differently. I mean, whatever we're going to do doesn't mean that we can't change it, but just keep in mind that if we get to the selection process and say, this isn't going to work, we need to go back and change the resolution before we just start altering the membership.
Well, we really wanted to be balanced. These numbers seem pretty balanced.
Yeah, and so ultimately, the composition is pleasure of council. Staff will do whatever council decides.
Okay.
But having that direction now would be helpful so we can make sure that we have the appropriate resolution for the first.
Any other comments from council?
With the composition on it, I understand, I think what you're saying as far as the residents fall into most of those categories, like city council members being residents, county commissioner likely is possible, Canyon City Energy Future could be residents, and then city business owners could go both ways. So, I mean, I can see the reason for maybe increasing the business component, because from the understanding that I have, Canyon City Energy Future has talked a lot about how it's impacting the businesses in different areas. So that might be something that we can look at when we're evaluating the application, is businesses from different parts of the community and how they're impacted. So, I mean, I think that's a fair consideration to maybe increase the Canyon City business owners to 3. I feel like that's reasonable because of the other opportunities to be residents, so.
Let me just go down the.
Okay, so so can I take that as your comment on the composition of the committee? And so that's what we're going to do now is provide direction to Ryan, our individual directions, to see if we have consensus. So, Brandon?
Do we need an odd number?
Ideally.
Ideally. So if we increase residents and business owners, it would come out odd still?
It would still come out odd, but you also want to make sure you have a manageable group.
Okay.
Trying to stay below 10.
Below 10?
Yeah.
I understand where Mandy's coming from. I think 2-2, 1-2 looks pretty good, personally.
Thank you, Brandon. Dolly, can I jump down to you?
Sure. I think it looks great the way it is. It looks balanced, and like you guys had said, it's a manageable group. I think we can get fair and equitable input from that ratio of people. So.
Great, thank you. Tim?
No, I actually like this one. I think it's a good, fair, balanced number, and I'm very fine with this.
Jim?
I mean, what I don't understand, which is somewhat digressing, is why I pay $1 a kilowatt and Mandy in business pays $1.10. That's like me going to the gas station and paying $1 for gas, and her going to the gas station and paying $1.50. I've never understood the rate differential between residential and business, and you don't really feel that unless you're a business. Well, the energy people have their own feelings, but then they sell additional electricity to large businesses at a discount, and then charge businesses additional rates. And you only feel that hurt in your pocketbook if you're a business. And this whole thing kind of evolves around that whole thing. So, I mean, I go with council as always in terms of supporting your viewpoints, but I would suggest that you have a larger number of business owners than you do residents. And it's not that I don't respect the viewpoints of the residents, it's just that I think that the business owners are much more impacted. And she stood there and told us that one of their points of the committee and getting those rates changed is the economic impact on our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Dolly, do you want to speak on the composition of the committee?
No. I was going to talk about what he said.
We're running out of time.
We're kind of running out of time.
Yeah. I'll tell him afterwards.
Okay,
I need protection.
Can I be there? Ashley.
I think it needs to be balanced, holistic, to represent everyone equally. So I like it the way it is.
Thank you. What I would say is that I'm not opposed to 3 business owners and 1 resident, but so perhaps you could write it that way so that we do have the flexibility during the choosing process. 2 or 3 business owners, 1 or 2 residents, not to exceed 9 total. That will give us the flexibility to decide.
Good point, John.
Based on the applications that we have. Who knows what we will see, and so that will untie our hands a little bit.
I think that's a good compromise.
Yeah, it's a good job.
Well done.
All right.
And with that, we're adjourned.